Today's lesson, we're going to be talking about consumer surplus and specifically how it is the economic measure of our surplus value of a transaction for the consumer. So, really, what we're talking about is the way that when you expect to pay more, but get a better deal when you walk away from that transaction, you'll experience a surplus value of whatever extra money you still have after you bought something that was unexpectedly cheaper. So if you imagine going to a store with $100 in your pocket, expecting to buy something that's regularly $100, so you expect to leave with that product and no cash in your pocket. But when you arrive, they let you know that there's a sale going on, so you're going to pay $80 and you're going to walk away with what you expected to buy with that $100 bill and $20 in your pocket. That $20 represents your surplus value as an individual consumer. So, what we want to do then is kind of consider what that means to a market or a group of consumers. In this case, the surplus value to that individual consumer might be represented by the vertical distance between the price that they paid, $60 or $80 for example, and the amount of money they had in their pocket that they were willing and able to pay for that product. So they've got the $100 in their pocket, they only paid $80, and therefore they take a surplus value of $20 away. The first customer in line, we're making the assumption that we've been able to kind of figure out how much everybody's willing and able to pay, and we actually were able to line them up in order of how much money they have in their pocket. So the first customer in line would have the most money that they're willing and able to pay for that product, but also because the market price is then set down here, that first customer is actually going to experience the highest level of consumer surplus. And when we add up all of those individual consumer surpluses, we're going to get basically the total consumer surplus for this market. And if we wanted to calculate it mathematically, we could do so with the area of a triangle formula. So, kind of looking specifically at that, the area of a triangle formula, which I've given up here, it probably could be a bit bigger, is 1/2 base times the height. Or I usually find the base and the height of the triangle and then divide that number by 2. So here we've got a height of 20 minus 8, or 12, and a base of 6, so 12 times 6 is 72. 72 divided by 2 is 36. So we've got a total consumer surplus of $36, for example, because there were 6 sold, and the maximum any consumer was willing and able to pay would have been $20. That's where the demand curve originated. But all consumers paid $8. So the surplus values of those basically 6 consumers that were able to purchase one end up adding up to a total of $36. Now, because there are 6 units sold and 36 total surplus, that doesn't mean that we would just have 36 divided by 6, or $6 in surplus for each consumer, because that first consumer ends up with $12 in surplus, and the last consumer essentially receives no surplus value because they went in with $8, they paid $8, and they walked away with only the product they were trying to buy. So that brings me to this point over here, which is that the triangles of surplus value represent what is gained by producers and consumers as a result of their participation in the market. If you imagine kind of living a self sustaining lifestyle and isolating yourself from everything in the world, um, when we go from doing that to engaging in markets in the rest of the world, and we trade our time and our services with and goods with other people, we end up gaining surplus values, and that is essentially represented by, in the consumer's case, this $36 blue triangle above. So, as far as commonly, you're going to be asked to identify consumer surplus by drawing a graph and properly labeling everything. You might be asked to calculate the consumer surplus using a given demand function, like a formula for the demand curve, as well as the equilibrium price and quantity. You might be just given a supply and a demand function and be asked to calculate consumer surplus and producer surplus from there. And we can do that because we're able to use the supply and demand functions to find this equilibrium point. And then finally, as we did in this example, you might be asked to calculate consumer surplus using a graph as opposed to using formulas and functions. So that's just a quick kind of summary and review of consumer surplus to try to make the whole concept digestible in a simple form. And hopefully this video is helpful for you to think about consumer surplus, both as an individual consumer while kind of understanding what sort of simplified model that we're looking through and the assumptions that we have to make, such as lining up every consumer in order of how much money they're willing and able to pay. But if you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to email me at nanoeconomicstv@gmail.com or hit the suggestion box on my Twitch page, and I'd be more than happy to review specific questions for your needs.